Hello everyone, my name is Ana Guerra, and today I'll be discussing how children between the ages of 0 to 2 years develop cognitively and linguistically, and how we can adapt the English language teaching to support that development. We will approach this using insights from two key theorists, Jean Piaget, who introduced the sensory motor stage, and Jerome Bruner, who described this period as the inactive stage. Understanding what infants are capable of during this time help us design learning experiences that are meaningful, engaging, and more developmentally appropriate. Okay, let's begin with Jean Piaget's sensorimotor stage. At this stage, children learn primarily through their senses and physical actions. They don't use language or symbols yet. Instead, they explore by touching, seeing, and moving. And Jerome Bruner complements this view with his inactive stage because he explained that children at this stage represent knowledge through actions, not words or images. So in other words, children understand the world by doing. Children between 0 and 2 can learn through senses and movements. They can recognize familiar voices or sounds. They begin babbling, which is their first attempt to imitate the language. And also they can understand cause and effect, like realizing that shaking a rattle makes noises, but they lack object permanence. For example, if a toy disappears, they assume that it no longer exists. So this tells us that they are learning in a very physical, immediate way. So language learning for them needs to be hands-on and supported by repetition and context. Now let's look at some effective teaching strategies for this age. For example, we can use some with gestures like head, shoulders, knees, and toes because these link word to body movements, improving memory and comprehension. Also, another strategy is using peek-a-boo games to teach vocabulary and to reinforce vocabulary and teach that things and words still exist even when they are out of sight. Also, we need to use real objects when introducing new vocabulary or words. For example, if we say apple, we need to show the kids a real apple so that they create a strong link between the word and its meaning. And finally, we can use imitation games, for example, babbling, imitating animal sounds, or repeating simple syllables, because this strengthens early speaking. Okay, in summary, infants and toddlers are active learners. They absorb the language best when it's tangible, interactive, and repetitive. So now we can continue with my partners that will explain the other learning stages at the different ages.
Hello, I am going to talk about the preparational stage, one of the stages of cognitive development proposed by Jean Piaget. The preparational stage is a fundamental phase of development where children begin to use language, imagine it, and play symbolically, but are not yet capable of logical reasoning. Their thoughts are influenced by perception and fantasy and difficult understanding another point of view. Understanding this stage is key for parents, teachers, and everyone who works with children. This stage occurs approximately between the ages of 2 and 7 and is characterized by significant advance in a child's thinking, although it is not yet logical or fully structured. During this stage, children develop what is known as symbolic thinking. This means they can represent objects or situations with words, drawing, or games. For example, a child may use a broom as if it were a horse and pretend to ride it, or imagine their doll is a real baby. this type of imagined play escapes at this stage. One of the most important characteristics of proportional thinking is egocentrism. Children are not yet able to see things for other people's perspectives. A very common example is when a child sits in front of the television and even though you tell them you can see, they respond that they can see you fine because they don't understand that you have a different perspective that they own. We also incur a lot of conservation, which is the inability to understand that certain properties such as quantity of or volume do not change even is the shape dance. For example, if we show a child two glasses with the same amount of water and then transform one to a tiger thin glass, the child we will say that it has more water simple because I look fuller. Another characteristic is centering, which is when the child focuses only on one aspect of the object or situation, ignoring the other. In the glass example, the child focuses only on the hair of the glass and doesn't notice its this case. We should also mention irreversible, which is the difficult children have in understanding that some action can be reserved. For example, if we break a cookie in half, the child may think they not have more cookies because they can't see that it's simple. In simple, the same cookies divided into pieces. Animals also occurs during this stage. We children believe that objects have lived or feelings. For example, they may say the big fur because it was tired, or the sun follows it because it wants to. Related to this is magical thinking, where children believe their thoughts or wishes can influence reality. For example, they think that if you really want into the rain, it's my hope. The professional state is a fundamental phase of development where children begin to use language and imagine.
The concrete operational stage in Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development spans from ages 7 to 11. During this stage, children develop the ability to think logically about concrete events and objects, and they begin to understand concepts like conservation and reversibility. They can also classify items and arrange them in order. Some characteristics of this stage. The first one, logical thinking. In this stage, children can solve problems using logic, but they still primarily rely on concrete examples and real-world experiences. The second one is conservation. They understand that the amount of something stays the same even its appearance changes. Reversibility. They grasp that some actions can be undone. And also classification. They can group objects based on shared characteristics, example, color or shape. Also, they can arrange objects in a logical order based on size, weight, or other dimensions. And they start to understand that others may have different perspectives and thought processes, and they become less egocentric.
The fourth stage of learning goes from 11 years onwards and is supported by Piaget. In this stage, children can think abstractly and hypothetically, also for opinions and arguments, understand metaphor, idioms, and figurative language. Also, children can analyze and interpret texts, develop critical thinking skills, and also express ideas more fluently in speech and writing. In this stage, some suggested English activities can be reading and text analysis, also writing activities such as letters, short stories, or poems, or playing complex situations such as ordering a food at a restaurant or job interviews, also group projects or presentation, or using videos or authentic materials such as short films or new articles.